All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kristin Nicole Rivera. And again, thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. We're here to talk about some amazing things that are going on in education and just ways that we can all be part of that. And so today we're going to talk about identity, social justice, and anti bias curriculum. A lot of really big and heavy topics, but it is something that's so important to our students and also something that is just so important to me. And I'm sure so important to all of you, which is maybe what brought you here tonight to join us. And so I do want to say that although we are going to talk about these topics today and we're going to do it in 1 hour, we're just scratching the surface of really what all of this means. And so, identity, social justice, and anti bias curriculum is something that, we could talk about for hours and days and months and spend school years really trying to work on this. And so today, again, will just be a scratch on that surface and hopefully get you thinking of what you would want to change in your classroom or what you would like to incorporate into your classroom. So, again, thank you for being here with us today. So, I wanted to share a little bit about me. I started off at College of the Canyons, which is where I met Renee Marshall. A shout out to you, Renee. And she's been my mentor and has helped me so much along the way and really is a big part of why I'm here today. I spent a little bit of time at UCSD, and then I eventually got my bachelor's degree from Chapman University. And then I went on to Loyola Marymount to get my master's in education. And this is just my positionality statement. And I do believe that for those of you going into education and those of you that would love to present and do things like that, to really craft your positionality statement. So basically, I want to say that I am Pacific Islander, Asian, I'm first generation American, cisgender, heterosexual female, whose pronouns are she, her, and hers. I told you a little bit about my educational background. I'm a middle child who was raised in a two-parent household with parents who have been married for over 40 years. I grew up middle class and went through the public education school system in LA. And I'm currently a kindergarten teacher and anti bias collective co chair. And the reason why I feel like giving this statement to all of you is important because this is what I'm an expert at, right? So I'm only an expert at who I am and what I've learned and the things that I've tried to incorporate into my life. I'm not an expert at anyone else. And so, whenever I speak or whenever I present or anything that I talk about comes only from my perspective or my learning or things that I've done in my life. So, again, I only speak from this perspective and continue to try to learn from other perspectives. So, what you see here and all of these things that I've pointed out to you is what I can be an expert at, which isn't everything. And so I really would like all of you to start thinking about your positionality statement, and that is really what you're an expert at. And so today, we are talking about identity and social justice and diversity. And so, this space that we're in today is going to have to be a brave one. And it's going to ask you to be brave in your thinking and what you desire for your classroom. So, I wanted to go over a few guiding principles just to set the stage for everything that we're going to be doing together. So I do again want to reiterate that this is a brave space, and what's said here stays here. People are going to talk from their experience, that stays here, and what's learned here and all of the great things that it sparks in your mind should leave here, and it should go into the people that you meet and the students that you encounter and just the spaces that you find yourself in. So the guiding principles are share from your own experience and work hard to understand the perspective of others. Lean into discomfort. Some of these topics or some of the things we might talk about might make you feel a little uneasy or something that you're not used to. Lean into that and really try to dig and see like why it's making you feel that way. Communicate when something doesn't sit right and be an active ally. And then tonight, please participate at whatever your 100% is. I want to acknowledge the fact that, all of us are living different lives right now. We are living through a pandemic. Some of us have worked all day long today. Some of you had all these different errands to do or classes to go to or even different sessions that you've been through today. So participate at what your 100% is. Maybe that means actively speaking, or maybe it means actively listening. Maybe it means taking notes. Maybe it means soaking it all in. Whatever 100% means for you, that's what I want you to do today. Are there any questions about our guiding principles or just any of that right now? Nope. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we're going to take a little look right now at this picture. And I want everyone just to look at it, read through it. I'll give about a minute. And I want you just to think about what you're noticing. All right. Does anyone want to share just something that they're noticing from looking at this drawing, this picture? Any thoughts?
It's not very objective.
Okay.
They're summing up based on only what they can see, not any experience, any personality traits, anything else.
I
Judgment.
also go ahead. I noticed that the gentleman to the right, his risk factors are the same as the older lady to the left, even though she's like assessing that he's Black, he's a male, and he has a baseball cap, and she's and he's looking at that she's white and is in the wrong neighborhood.
So a lot of judgment is going on in this picture for sure.
Yes, for sure. But they scored the same.
Yes. So thank you all for sharing some of the things that you were noticing on here. Yes, this at the end of the day, there's a lot of judgment going on in here. And something that I always find interesting when I look at this picture is that sometimes a risk factor for one person becomes a mitigating factor for another. Or sometimes the risk and the mitigating factor are the same exact thing, and it adds to that confusion. And so I really just wanted to point this picture out because every single day when we pass people, we do this. We pass judgment in whatever way that looks. We see somebody and we think, am I going to say hi or am I not going to say hi? Or do I need to go a different way? All of those things are things that happen in people's minds when they see strangers or see someone who's not familiar to them or anything like that. And so in this portion of our session, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into our personal identities. So If you have paper or something that you can take notes on, that would be great. And we're going to just look again. I told you we're scratching the surface on all of these things today. We could go days and months and all of that. And our identity is constantly something that we're working on or changing and things like that. So we're scratching the surface, but let's do it. So these are some things that I want you thinking about right now. What do you consider to be part of your identity? How do you see yourself? And how do you think others see you? So here is a diagram that you can use, or you can choose to use if you would like, to kind of draft out your identity. So how you see yourself and how you think others see you, and maybe, what of that really overlaps. So I'll give a couple minutes for you to try and work on that. All right, I see some people still working. And please, feel free to keep working on it as we move along a little bit through this. So I wanted to share with you, I did this exercise myself. I wanted to share with you a little bit of how I filled this out. So how I see myself: a woman, middle child, a friend. I'm educated. I'm a great teacher. I'm a sports fan. I'm a traveler. I'm young. I'm busy. And I'm a homebody. And I hate coffee. So those are some things that I see about myself. And those are, when I did this, those were the things that came to mind at first. And so now how I think others see me. I think people see my race, that I'm Asian Pacific Islander. I think at first glance, people might think I have an accent. People don't see me as young anymore. Because I'm a woman, they say, you don't understand anything about sports. Because I'm a teacher, they might say, she has an easy job. She has so much vacation. People see me as social or busybody, and this is my favorite, runs on Pinterest and coffee. People always say, oh, teachers love Pinterest and teachers love coffee, and they always assume those things. And I'm like, I hate coffee. I don't like coffee at all. That's not me. But it's just interesting to me how I see myself is very different than how other people see me. And something that I've reflected on when I do this activity, and again, let me say that this is how I think others see me. So this might not be how people see me at all, but this is what I think. And what I noticed about myself is that when I think about how others see me, I always go the negative route. Like, they think all these negative things about me, rather than just thinking like maybe they do see me as other things that are positive. And this again goes back to that judgment. When we're talking about identity, you have your identity, but there's always that judgment that is passed all around. And so when I look at this and I think about what is actually the same from how I see myself and how I think others see me, it's very surface level, right? Female and teacher. And there's not very much else that overlaps. And so maybe when you were creating your identity map, this might have been the case for you, where you think that others see you in a negative light or pass judgment on you. Um, but it's important that when we're talking about identity, that you are really digging deeper into who you are and not always necessarily how others see you. And so I want to shift gears just a little bit, even with talking about identity. I wanted to talk about how our identity really shapes our privilege. So I'm going to read you this excerpt, or if there's someone in here who would like to actually read this out loud, that would be wonderful. Is there
I can
anyone who
read
would
it.
like to? Okay,
Nancy.
great.
The parts of your identity that you noticed and are most aware of on a daily basis may change depending on where you are, who you are with, and the experiences you continue to have in your life. These identities you do not think much about. Even the ones you barely notice are always with you. Some social identities hold power and privilege, others do not. Even with us, there are parts of us that hold some power and other parts that are oppressed. This is why we work to understand our identities within society. We need to always examine our whole selves. The identities that fit neatly into the imaginary box and are typically the ones with the most power and agency.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that. So, this is basically saying the things that we think about, the things that we see as our identity, are the ones that pop up easily, right? So, when I say, here's 1 minute, write down your things that have to do with your identity, those are the things that come up so easily. But that's not only what your identity is about, that's not only who you are. There's so much more that is encompassed in that. And a lot of your identity holds privilege, and in some cases doesn't hold. And so in this next slide, I want you to look at these different parts of your identity, and maybe these are some things that you didn't add onto your brainstorming sheet or that chart that I showed you. If some of these things aren't what you had already put into your identity, I'd like you to take just a couple minutes or a few seconds to add those into there. So maybe you didn't add your race, maybe you didn't add your education, maybe you didn't add your class. Maybe some of these things aren't what you thought of right away when you thought of identity. Does anyone want to share? Was there something that they didn't originally add into their identity map that when they saw this, they're like, oh, I didn't realize that that was something that was part of my identity, or I forgot about that. I should write that in.
One thing that I didn't add was education and religion.
Okay. Anyone else? And for you who said education and religion, what were you thinking when you saw it on this page?
I didn't think like that define. If can be honest, I think it's just been this year where I've finally overcame like the imposter syndrome of being in college. So I don't feel like I identify with my religion or like myself with education because it's not expected of me.
Got it. Anyone else want to share? No. Okay. So in our identity, definitely. Oh,
There are hands raised.
oh, sorry. Um, Go ahead. I think I see one hand raised, but I can't see.
It's Cecilia.
Cecilia?
Yes, thank you. I just didn't know if anyone else had their hand raised, so I didn't want to start talking.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to share. It was interesting because on the note of like what I think people see of me, I put like hot right away, but I didn't put it in how I see myself. So I was. It's kind of interesting to me to see like, okay, why didn't I put hot in my identity, but I did put it on the other one. And so seeing it here, I don't know, it just makes me wonder why I immediately put like class as to what people think of me, but I didn't add it to how I saw myself as, being part of my identity is my class.
So passing judgment on yourself almost, and other people see you this way, and we can always be our biggest critic, and so we don't always add those things to our identity also. Thank you for sharing. All right. So what I do want to point out, especially on this slide, is that parts of our identity holds privilege, and usually your identity that fits nicely and neatly into the boxes that society has created, it's usually those parts of your identity that holds the most privilege. And sometimes parts of your identity holds privilege in one space that you encounter and then doesn't hold privilege in another space that you encounter. And so that word privilege can be constantly moving and changing depending on where you are and what that space is requiring of you. And so as we've dug a little bit deeper into our identity and thinking about our privilege, all of us here are interested in education, are educators already, are future educators, planning to be teachers, planning to work in policy, all from different walks of life. But in this space, even in this session, we hold privilege. Privilege to be an educator, privilege to inspire, privilege to make a difference. And so I want to take a little bit of time for you to think about what your why is. So like, why is it that you want to be an educator? Why is it that this is important for you? Why are you here? Why is this something that you are interested in and wanting to do or pursue? So take a couple minutes to write down your why. All right. Thank you for writing that down. And of course, if you need some more time, please take that time to think more deeply into what your why is. It is absolutely important to know your why, especially in this field, because it is what keeps you going. We are going to shift gears a little bit and dig deeper into that social justice and anti-bias curriculum. I will show you a little bit of what that looks like in classrooms right now. And again, we're scratching the surface today, so it's not going to be so detailed, but I am free if anyone wants to know more or dig deeper into these topics. And I put this purposefully here about knowing your why, because social justice and anti-bias curriculum is definitely not easy. And I'm sure those of you, know that in our climate today, this is even more important and even more at the forefront of what we should be doing and what our students should be learning and creating and, changing. And so, because it's not easy, you have to know your why and stick with your why, because that is what's going to, on those really hard days where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't do this anymore. When you go back to your why, you can do it a little bit longer. When you go back to your why, you remember why you started doing this to begin with. And so hold on to that why. So here's just a diagram of what social justice in education looks like. And today, these are all of the parts that are encompassed in it, but we're going to take a deeper dive on only one of these, which is the anti-bias part of education. But all of this is encompassed in what social justice in education should look like. It should be anti-biased, equitable, inclusive, culturally responsive, and anti-racist. And so it's important to name all of these out, because it's easy to fall into, focusing on just one single part. But all of these parts work together in order to create that whole look of social justice working and interwoven into our education system. And so today, again, we're going to work mostly on what anti-bias education looks like, but all of these things, again, we could talk for days and hours about how all of this can be shaped into the classroom. And so anti-bias is judging that implicit biases in yourself and in the work that we do. We need to eliminate those and reshape what the educational policies look like, because a lot of our system, our education system, is rooted in bias, and it is against those people that have already been oppressed and excluded from those groups. Education right now is not equitable. Let's just call it out. It's not equitable. It doesn't meet the needs of all of our students. There's gaps, that need to be closed. There's ways that we need to give kids more access. Education should be inclusive. It should include all of the groups and not just some. We shouldn't always be hearing from the perspective of one group of people. It should be inclusive of all the groups of people, all the people that are in your, it should reflect the people in your classroom. Culturally responsive, we need to shape our instructional practice, again, to reflect all of our students' needs. So their developmental needs, their social and emotional needs, and their culture, just the way that they were raised and the way that they learn. All of that should be included in like a social justice education. And anti-racist, we need to be actively working to dismantle parts of the school system that perpetuate white supremacy. Call it out, say it as it is. That's what we need to be. Our students need to be anti-racist. They need to be able to pinpoint these things in the education system and say, hey, that's not me. And hey, that's not how it is. That's not how it is in my family. There's other stories. There's other ways that this can be told. It's not only told from one perspective. And so, as I said, we're going to dig deeper into the anti-bias part of a social justice education, but the vision of anti-bias education is a world in which all children are able to blossom and each child's particular abilities and gifts are able to flourish. And so when you can deeply understand this statement, that every single child that comes into contact with you, that comes into your classroom, brings their own abilities and their own gifts, and all of that should be celebrated, that is how you are going to be able to like weave in this anti-bias education in what we see as regular education every single day and what's going on in schools. And so when you realize that every single kid that comes to you is different and special, that's what's going to make your classroom and your work so much more fun, engaging, and fruitful. And so before that can happen, all of us have to acknowledge that bias is built into the education system already. It's there. There's advantages and disadvantages to the system and the institutions that we have. The bias that is in our system shapes the way that children have access. And if you see different schools and different groups of kids in different schools, their access to the curriculum is different. And that's because of the implicit, or that's because of the explicit bias that's already made into that system. There's absolutely an inequity of resources. If you see a school in an affluent community versus school in the inner city, the resources are different. That is another bias that's built into the system of education. Cultures, different people, all of that can be missing in textbooks. It can be missing in what, teachers see in their kids. All of that can be missing from the education system because of the biases we bring into the classroom ourselves. And then, stereotypes. And stereotypes, sometimes they can be good, sometimes they can be bad. But having these stereotypes definitely affects the way that the education system is flowing and running. And so the first thing we have to do is recognize that bias is built into the system. And now how are we going to actively make education anti-bias? And so we can read through the goals of anti-bias education. Is there anyone who would like to read the first two goals? Anyone? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so goal number 1, each child will demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, and positive social identities. Goal number 2, each child will express comfort and joy with human diversity, accurate language for human differences, and deep, caring human connections. Goal number 3, each child will increasingly recognize unfairness and understand that unfairness hurts. Goal number 4, each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and/or discriminatory actions.
Thank you. And these goals all build on one another. So children and us as educators work on goal number 1, and then we build on it and work on goal number 2 and goal number 3. They all are stepping stones for each other until kids are able to achieve goal number 4. And I'll show a little bit of some of those examples and how that continuum looks like in the classroom. And so right now we're going to do an activity together, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And I'm going to put a link in the chat, and I would like everyone to click on that link. And when you click on that link, let me, okay, there's the link. Click on that link, please, and you can add your name if you would like to. And then I'm going to be asking everyone to do a little drawing. So just want to make sure everyone's there. Click on that link. All right, so we're going to be doing a drawing activity right now. And what I would like for everyone to do is to draw a boat. Draw a boat. So in that link where I sent you on Nearpod, draw that boat, please. Nice. And submit your boat when you are ready. Awesome. I see the boats coming in. All right, take about 10 more seconds to finish up your boat. Thank you. All right, are you ready to see your boats? I'm going to share my screen to show you the boats. So these are the boats that have been turned in, and I just want you to take a look at what the boats look like and how each person decided to create their boat. Nice. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. Okay, here's our next one. We're going to do another drawing. And I would like you to draw a picture of home. A home. Draw a picture of a home.
A home or our home?
Whichever you want. Nice. Awesome. And I love that you asked a home or our home, because that is, you know, something to think about. And I do want to share now the pictures of the homes. And everyone's interpretation was a little bit different. Some, you know, some drew trees around, some drew family members as home. Some people added that into their drawing and wrote family. Others may have just drawn what they see as a typical home. It might not even be the home that they grew up in, but it's what they picture in their mind when they hear the word home. And some people drew, you know, detached homes. Some people drew apartment buildings. Some people drew, you know, scenery around their home, and some people didn't. But all of these pictures, all of these drawings are what you see or what you think of when you say home. All right, we're going to do one more. This is our last drawing. I want you to draw what family is to you. Draw what family is to you. All right, take about 10 more seconds and let me share that now. And this is what family means to all of you. And some people drew their family, some people drew hearts, some people put words of what family means to them. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. The reason why I wanted us to engage in this activity is because even with words that we hear every single day, every single one of us comes with a different idea. Every single one of us has experienced these words in different ways. And so what it looks like for us is different than what it looks like for everyone else. And this is the case when it comes to our students. We come with what we know best. We come with how we grew up. Again, we are experts at who we are, but we are not experts at who our students are and who the kids are. And so what knowledge you come with and what you think of is and can be different from what your students are coming to you with. And so having this shared understanding is really important because all of us come from different backgrounds and different upbringings. And so I want to share one of my favorite TED Talks, and maybe some of you have heard this before. This is just a snippet of that TED Talk, and it's called The Danger of a Single Story. So let me share that with you.
I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind, white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. I grew up under repressive military governments that devalued education so that sometimes my parents were not paid their salaries. And so as a child, I saw jam disappear from the breakfast table. Then margarine disappeared. Then bread became too expensive. Then milk became rationed. And most of all, a kind of normalized political fear invaded our lives. All of these stories make me who I am. But to insist on only these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that formed me. This in people, a recognition of that quality, it emphasizes the different. Stories matter. Many matter. You can use this process as time. Stories can be power. Stories can break the dignity of people and also repair a broken dignity. I read that when we reject the single story, we realize that about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. Thank you.
Thank you. I love this TED Talk because it goes back to even just this activity that we did together. We all come from different backgrounds and we all have lots of stories to tell. We don't just have one. And this, the students that come to us do not only have one story. It's important for all of us to recognize that they come with lots of stories and that in our classrooms and in the spaces where we hold privilege, we need to acknowledge all of those stories and find ways for us to have those stories told and understood by other people. And so what does this mean for us as educators? What does it mean that we shouldn't fall into this trap of a single story? What does that mean? And so these are some things that we can do as educators. And again, this is just a small list, and I would love for you to create your own list, even if it's, you know, today or later on. But what can we do as educators? We can acknowledge our own biases. We can work towards providing different perspectives. We can dig deeper within ourselves to understand our privilege. We can talk about the hard topics with our students, and we can listen and try to understand our students' stories. And that is the beginning of creating this like anti-bias education in your classroom. And so we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and I'm going to show you some ways that you can incorporate this into your classroom. But definitely culturally responsive literature is absolutely important to have when building your classroom library. You want books where kids can see themselves, whether it's through pictures of kids who look like them or through stories where they can see their struggle or they can see their life and be able to connect with those characters. And this is just, you know, a glimpse of the books that could be in your classroom library. There are tons of books where kids can see themselves, but it's important to have a culturally responsive library in your classroom. It seems so small, but it is so big. When kids don't see themselves in books, then they don't see themselves as important. And so that is one step that you can take into making sure that your students are in a classroom where they can connect and connect to literature. And then I'm just going to show you a little bit of what happens at our school and just how we have taken this and done it in our classrooms. And so in kindergarten, we do a unit on ourselves, and we really dig deep into what each kindergartner looks like. We talk about our hair, our eyes, our skin color, the shape of our nose, the teeth that we're missing, all of those, because that is part of our identity. What we look like is part of our identity. And then as a kindergartner, we talk about what our kindergarten identity looks like. And as a 5 and 6 year old, their identity, they'll say, well, I love to play basketball and I'm a girl. I love to sing. I go to church. And this is the beginnings of forming your identity. And then as adults, we build upon that. And even what you celebrate, what your family celebrates, what you celebrate culturally, all of that digs into your identity. And so when we are talking about the goals, this is the beginning of that goal 1, is really just being able to understand who you are. And then we start talking about how we as people can help other people. And so we create a shared understanding, a shared definition. This one was for the word ally, which the shared definition we came up with was to help or stand up for someone, even if they aren't your friend. And so it's a very kindergarten definition, but it's the beginning of understanding what all of that really means. And then in 3rd grade, after understanding who you are and learning about the people around you, this was a poem that one of our 3rd graders wrote. And she said, we all one race, human, no matter black or white, we all need to be treated the same way, no matter race or religion, because we are all one race, human. Imagine a 3rd grader, and this is what listening to all stories. In 4th grade, now they're really building on these things that they have learned, and they're able to tackle stereotypes and how to fight a single story, and to notice in their books or notice in literature that they've read in class how some people are shown only in one way, and they're able to question those things. So this is all a building of those things. And again, this is just like a very surface deep dive, but there's more to it and more that can be talked about and learned about when it comes to how all of this can happen in your classrooms. And so as we start to wrap this up, I want everyone to reflect on really what we've talked about today, the parts that we dug deeply into and the parts where we just scratched the surface, maybe things you want to learn more about. I want you to think about those things and create an intention for yourself. What is something that you can do in the near future, even tomorrow, that's going to change the future of education, the future of your children? So I want you to take just a minute or so to think about that. What will be your intention moving forward after this session today? Thank you. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone for being brave today. We talked about a lot of topics. It asked you to dig deeper into yourself. And I hope that you continue to do that work and really continue to see how your identity is going to shape the education of your students. My email is here if you have any other questions. I'll also stay on the Zoom for a few more minutes if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask me or anything that they'd like to talk about. And if you haven't done so already, please put your name and email into the chat. Again, this is how we can see who is here and get your certificates of participation over to you. Again, I want to say thank you. Thank you for spending your Thursday with me and allowing me to talk about this, what I'm so passionate about. So thank you everyone for being here. And I absolutely appreciate you. And I hope that your next endeavor with students, you will be able to take some of what you've learned here and incorporate it into that. So thank you. Thank you for being here.